Welcome to the 9th annual Scottish Episcopal Institute lecture on Wholeness and Holiness. Delighted to introduce the Reverend Professor Annalu Waller. Now, if you have any technical difficulties during this lecture, please feel able to drop a quick chat to Aidan, who is our technical support tonight. Otherwise, we are being recorded and live streamed, but nobody should be visible, so just the speakers are visible for that. Now, it's my delight to introduce you, Annalu Waller. You are a Professor of Human Communication Technologies at the University of Dundee. You direct the Dundee Augmentative and Alternative Communication Research Group. And you have worked in that field since 1885. And I was very interested to know that you started actually in South Africa with the Assessment and Training Center for Augmentative and Alternative Communication already in 1987. Now, since then, of course, you have come to Dundee. Your primary research areas are human-centered computing, natural language processing, personal narrative and assistive technology, and you champion the active involvement of disabled adults and children in all aspects of research and development of technology. Now, it's wonderful to have you among us as an ordained Scottish Episcopal priest and the honorary chaplain of the University of Dundee. You got an OBE in the Queen's New Year's Honours List in 2016 for services to people with complex communication needs. And you are honorary fellow of the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. Now, that is a long list of amazing achievements. But of course, what we are most interested in tonight is your talk on wholeness and holiness. And I think I speak for everybody if I say we are really looking forward to that. And your discussion of the nature of disability and faith, what that means to you, your life, and why you believe that we should view disability and difference as integral to being human. So we are all really looking forward to hear from you. I understand you want to talk for a shorter period so that everybody has opportunity to ask questions. So again, because others can't speak in this, please put your questions and your comments in the chat, and then I will be able to pick them up from there and have the conversation with Annalu. So Annalu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna Clark, for that lovely introduction. I always get very embarrassed when I hear all that being read. And it's just a delight and an honor to have been invited to deliver this year's annual lecture for the SCI. It is also very daunting, and preparing has given me an opportunity to reflect on my life and the parts of my story which have had significance in where I am today. I must admit that having watched last year's lecture with Professor Grant Casco, I was reminded that I better tell everybody that my lecture will not be an academic computers. I'm a computer scientist, not a very learned theologian, but instead I want to use my experience and my practical knowledge when I need to do so. So I do hope that you will all indulge me by coming with me on a journey of discovery, a journey which has molded me and has led me to a deeper understanding of what it means to be made in the image of God. Now, people who know me and know my research will understand that the concept of story or narrative has been an important thread throughout my personal and academic life. I grew up in a family of storytellers. We shared our experiences with one another, and we learned the power and wisdom gleaned from pages of books. We were real book readers. But little did I know that story would become the focus of a 30-year research career, working to support people with physical disabilities and little or no functional speech. My observations have revealed that the one thing people cannot do is engage in personal storytelling. If you use a speech output machine like the one that Stephen Hawking used, it is very difficult to share your story. We can say, I want a cup of tea, I want a coffee, but it's far more difficult to discuss what I did yesterday. So as a computer scientist with fingers in all sorts of pies, I have immersed myself in psycholinguistics, focusing on conversational narrative and ways in which we can support people who use other means of communication to share their story with others. Now, being able to share our experience is, I think, what is fundamental to being human. We all relate stories all the time. Stories help us to engage with each other. We make friends by sharing stories, and we make sense of who we are in the world by reflecting and retelling our stories. Sharing our problems and concerns with each other help us to work through those difficult times. We share happy times and we muddle through what we call life. By sharing and reforming the way we tell each other of our experiences, the more we reform the way we see ourselves and the way others see us. In short, we are our stories. The way we see ourselves is determined by both our life experiences and our individual personalities. We know that the early life experiences play a crucial role in molding us into the people we become. The role of parent, caregiver, family, friend, teacher, they instill in us a sense of self-worth, which cannot be underestimated. And that early foundation of who we are is critical to how we grow up and see ourselves. I cannot remember becoming aware of my disability, of being different, but research suggests that this awareness develops at around the age of 4. What I do remember is that I wanted to know what cerebral palsy was. And I remember poring over diagrams of the brain as my father explained why my brain did not quite work the way it should. This was for me intriguing, and I think it laid down the basis for me doing rehabilitation later on in life. Now, I have an obvious disability. I'm lucky. What you see is what you get. There is no hiding away. But more people live with hidden disabilities. And I think we tend to forget that we only see a fraction of the number of disabled people who we mix and work with. I am different. I look different, I move differently, I talk differently. I love it when children come up to me and say, "Why do you walk funny?" And I start explaining that my brain got hurt when I was born, and they look at me and they say, "Why do you talk funny?" Wonderful. Children are great. But I grew up in a society where there were very few disabled adults, very few role models. So I learned from those who had no obvious impairments. And as a young person, I tended to fit in more easily with non-disabled peers, despite having to attend a special school. As I matured, I have often asked myself why I am so comfortable in my own skin. So many disabled people I meet have a negative view of themselves or are angry because they see themselves as different. Even the word disabled has a negative connotation. A lot better than handicapped, but it still has a negative connotation. People with disabilities have been regarded with fear and contempt for centuries. And disability has often been linked with evil. Not so long ago, people with deformities and birthmarks were burnt as witches. I often think I would have made a great witch. And the birth of a disabled child is still regarded in many cultures as a curse. One of these stories that we heard when I was teaching in South Africa was of a family taking home a disabled newborn child, and their hut was burnt down by neighbors because society saw that child as a sign of a curse on that family and the village. But with advances in medicine and the compassionate work of many Christian communities, the opportunity to cure illness came about. And for a long time, the so-called medical model focused on curing disability as if it were an illness. We try to normalize people. And I know that last year's lecture, Professor McCaskill talked about this need to make people the same and normalize folk. Being disabled is still viewed as being abnormal, despite the impossibility to define what normal is. What is normal? Happily, our society is moving to a more social model or even an inclusive model of disability, in which we acknowledge that disability is more to do with society and the challenges that society brings in attitudinal and physical barriers. And I worry sometimes that we forget that even trying to park your car and finding a tow truck in the Bluebird Bay is restricting people from actively living and contributing to our society. These barriers prevent us from playing a full role in society. But we are getting there. I'm approaching retirement and I can see the changes over 60 odd years. So we are moving forward. And yet I fear that in times of crisis and stress, society is apt to lose those advances. During lockdown, disabled people were suddenly viewed as dispensable. After when person-centered care as an edict determined that if you had a neurological condition like cerebral palsy or Parkinson's or anything like that, and ended up in a hospital, you would not be eligible for ventilation. Those more able were seen to have a better chance of beating the virus, and people who were disabled were considered less and not as important. In fact, in my whole life, that was the only time I have been scared of being disabled, because I knew that the structures that we had built up had been broken down in one fell swoop. Our social care model is collapsing. Adults I know are being put into nappies at night because there is no funding to provide appropriate staff in care facilities. When the chips are down, you can see what is important to society. I can never say his name. Dostoevsky is credited with the quote, "The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons." And we are hearing a lot about prison overcrowding at the moment. I suggest that we extend that quote to the degree of civilization can be judged by entering its prisons and care institutions. Now, I was brought up with a total sense of accepting who I am. I was brought up with understanding that I was disabled, but I had better get on with it. Society owed me nothing because I was just me. My disability did not dictate who I am. Instead, I was loved, cherished, and challenged by my parents to be the person I was meant to be. Looking back, I am now struck how, despite the fact that they had to deal with the loss of who they thought their baby would be, they had the wisdom to realize that I was and always would be Annalu. Another strong factor was that although I didn't grow up in a religious house, my parents had a very strong faith, and that instilled in me a belief that I was valued, but within a bigger realm. And yet, even though I felt valued in a loving family and was actively included in girl guiding and Sunday school, I always felt that I was on the edge and I didn't quite belong. This inner faith or something other or bigger has given me this deep sense of peace, despite always being on the edge. It has given me meaning and value going forward. Being on the edge, and I never quite understood it until I started training for ordination, ironically, because it was then that being on the edge came into perspective. This ordination was not something I actively sought. I was felt physically dragged into it. My appointment as lecturer was beyond anything I had ever contemplated. I loved teaching. The opportunity to shape the next generation is such a privilege. So why did God want more? But alongside my teaching and my research, I found myself walking alongside others as they tried to make sense of their lives in times of despair and in times of hope. And after much soul-searching and discernment, I was selected for training and was deaconed and then ordained as a worker priest in 2005. One of the experiences I have had being a strange priest is that my being allows me to connect connect with those with hidden and apparent disabilities. Ron McCaskill's lecture again, I keep on referring to Ron's lecture because I thought earlier Ron said everything I want to say. But his lecture reminds us, and I have found this as well, that it's the hidden disabilities that are often more disabling than upfront apparent disability. Research backs this up, and a survey recently showed that people with hidden disabilities which they hadn't even acknowledged were found to be more disabling or affecting the person's life than a physical disability. And yet, when we think about disability, we think of the little wheelchair. And in fact, people with mobility disabilities are a very small number compared to those with hearing disabilities, ADHD, or other challenges. As a worker priest, my ministry is embedded in secular employment. And so I cannot separate my being priest from my day-to-day activities. In a sense, it is like my cerebral palsy. Being priest is who I am, but unlike my disability, most people I meet have no idea that I'm an ordained priest. So in a sense, that is my hidden attribute or skill or gift, in the same way that someone who is neuroatypical or has ADHD has additional attributes that we might not know about. To be a chaplain is such a privilege. I have the opportunity to support people, whoever they are, faith or world faith, or world beliefs, or no belief. My faith has led me to a deeper understanding that we all see God or belief through our own individual eyes. And it is through listening and sharing our views, our stories of where we are and where we might be, which makes us human. Earlier this year, I heard a talk from a wonderful teacher, Ed Kivrin, who runs workshops with children on empathy. And Ed taught me to rethink our golden rule. Do unto others what you would want them to do to you. And he made me think, because not everyone wants what I want. So how dare I assume that because I think in a way is what they should think. And empathy, empowerment is actually being able to listen to somebody and to support them to be the best that they can be in whatever faith or belief or environment they live. I might not agree with them, and I have the right not to agree, but I need to understand that difference is important, and that it would be a very boring world if we all thought the same way and had the same belief structure. So there have been times in my own life when I have been faced with issues that have questioned my own values and beliefs. And I think that part of our growth as people of faith is to actually develop the way we think. As an early Christian, I was a very black and white person. I really believed in the letter of the book, and that's what was. And it took friends who were challenging that way of thinking to actually make me think, who am I to judge another? Because as a follower of Jesus, I'm called to support people where they are. So the more I work in the field of communication, the more I realize that what makes us human is actually the ability to build and develop relationships across boundaries. And crossing those boundaries is fearful. We don't like crossing into territory that we don't know. So the only way to do this is to listen and to try and understand, because being on the edge is uncomfortable. But in that uneasy space, I believe that that is where we should strive to be, especially as Christians. Now, I don't know whether or not I should tell this story, but my first weekend at Tything, when it was still called Tything, the SEI, I found it very uncomfortable. I was accommodated in a separate wing of the retreat center. The accessible room, I knew no one. All the activities assumed theological knowledge I had yet to acquire, and probably don't have it yet. It was awful. What was I doing there? I nearly never went back. had it not been for another ordinand that I met on the weekend. I don't think either of us would have gone back. And then, like most revelations, the theme of the weekend resonated when I read Richard Holloway's Dancing on the Edge. And yet another bishop, Idris Jones, fed my thinking further when he explained a book he just read about our evolutionary human nature. Our evolutionary nature leads us to value group membership. We are programmed to exclude those who do not fit what we consider to be the norm, the other. And that is what I regard as the fundamental message of the Gospels. For some, there does remain a dichotomy between the existence of disability and the evidence that Jesus cured so many during his ministry. And he exhorted his disciples to do the same. Go and cure, make the lame walk, make the blind see, make the deaf hear. We read the story, for example, of Jesus curing the paralyzed man. And then I get asked, how can you be a Christian and have faith and still be disabled? Because disability and disease is still equated with the lack of faith for many Christians. The number of times I hear people really struggle about getting older or coping with cancer or terminal illness. Thinking of the miracle of the paralyzed man, Graham Monteith, in his book Deconstructing Miracles, wonders if perhaps the man might not have wanted to be physically healed. Did anyone actually ask him? Because he would have lost his ability to beg for his keep. After all, Jesus only healed the man as a sign. The man's need to be recognized and accepted as part of the community. This, for me, is the key to that miracle. Being made whole is to be recognized and accepted by our communities and by ourselves. I remember walking downtown as a teenager with my father, and a woman approached us and said, "Oh, you've got to come to this healing service tonight." and you will be healed. And I naively looked up at my dad and I said, why do I need to be healed? Because my parents had wisely brought me up to believe that my cerebral palsy was part of who I am, who God wants me to be. In a sense, we are all disabled in some way, and we live a faith where the person we follow was ultimately the most disabled you can be on the cross. Some are more visibly disabled than others, some very profoundly so. But we are all made in the image of God, whether we have a healthy mind, a healthy body, a healthy spirit or not. And accepting that we are all beloved by God is the beginning, I believe, of being made whole. However, this sense of wholeness can only be experienced if we believe in the healing miracle of God's healing peace. It is natural for us to want to care and protect those who are less able than we are. But I think the challenge for us as society is to identify gifts and abilities in everyone and to empower each other to reach our individual potential. It may be uncomfortable for us to contemplate, but the paralyzed man was brought into the center of the congregation, not kept to the fringes. So the miracle of being human is about being able to flourish in the circumstances we find ourselves in. Understanding that pain, disability, aging is part of being human. It's not abnormal. Healing and wholeness go hand in hand. Wholeness is not about perfection. It is how we deal with misfortune and fortune. It is how we deal with changing circumstances. It is how we move through the challenges of life that makes us whole people. So being human means being unique. And being human means that at some stage in all our lives, we will experience disability, illness, and challenge. Success or wholeness is not about being perfect or making lots of money or being an athlete. Rather, it is being able to navigate all the intrinsic and extrinsic challenges that life brings, discovering and valuing who we are and finding fulfillment in our unique uniqueness. We are made in the image of God, and that wholeness brings with it holiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annalu. That is very special. Thank you. Now, I wonder whether there's anybody else who has any questions. Um, uh, so here is somebody who asks, with the rapid development of assistive technology, including things like natural language processing, do you feel that these are helpful for disabled people who choose to use them? Or does it put pressure on disabled people to adopt them so that their communication is more comfortable for others?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Excellent. Assistive technology is a tool, and we all use tools when we need support to do something. So my view is there are people who choose their own voice, even though it's very difficult, because someone knows how to interpret them. And that is as valid as any use of technology. Technology is not a panacea. It can help, but it's there to be chosen. In fact, most of the technology we use today is absolutely rubbish. And we make it work for when we need it to work. And I think that there needs to be an awareness and training of people to be able to use technology when it's appropriate in a way that suits the person who chooses to use that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that is really indeed that the agency stays with the person who uses the technology. Yeah, thank you. I was wondering about the way you used or almost used the word gift and the word disability in exchange. And I wondered whether you could unpack a bit more for us what the gifts are that disability, both our own and others, bring us.
I often talk about being incognito and being able to get away with murder because people don't necessarily perceive what people's strengths are because they're disabled. It is well known that people who think differently or see differently or hear differently have other perceptions and ways that give us as humans another way of looking at things. I've just delivered a keynote at a conference about empowerment, and I was approached by disabled people to talk about how non-disabled people need to actually accept and realize the skills and the abilities that disabled people have to give us. I have learned more from my volunteer expertise than I could ever have learned from so-called professionals who are meant to know about things. Because it's the lived experience that makes such a difference. The other thing is that I think we can learn so much about how to cope with significant challenges. When I say that I'm supporting people who are really struggling with their care support, if I was in their shoes, I would have actually given up years ago. And so that resilience and that ability to problem solve is part of the disabled person's DNA. And I think people who become disabled, whether permanently or temporarily or get older, who've never been disabled before, struggle to actually deal with that change in circumstance. And I think we could actually be listening far more to people who could minister to us. And for me, my biggest privilege is when I celebrate the Eucharist, because I do it in a different way. And every time I celebrate the Eucharist, I know that people in the congregation are having a different experience and they are connecting in different ways to the mystery of the God we believe in. And I think but we need to respect and view people who are other, and I'm not only talking about disabled people now, I'm talking about immigrants, foreigners, people who are slightly different, people of different faiths. We need to allow people to actually minister to us as much as we minister to them.
Thank you very much, Annalu. I don't want to add anything to that or even summarize it, because I think that is just such a gift, and you have given us such a gift today. So thank you very, very much for that. And thank you to Aidan for our technical support, and to Lama for her wonderful question. And a only thing to say is that you're all very welcome to join us again for the Advent series that Stephen Holmes is doing on creation theology, which will be SEI's next offering online. And I hope you all have a good evening and take the learning from today into the lives of tomorrow and the coming days and months. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.